Hi humanities students, in this video I want to briefly introduce you to our midterm paper project. It's going to be a 6-paragraph paper organized around one cultural tension that you'll choose from our cultural tension list. So for example, I might choose traditional subordination and ideals of female equality. And I'm going to write an introduction about that tension. I'm going to have 4 body paragraphs, each of which looks at a text or a work of art or some other artifact we've discussed in the course. And then I'm going to wrap up with a conclusion and an MLA formatted works cited page. So the first element that we want to look at is the introduction. And the introduction is very important because it's there where you're going to say, this is the tension I'm looking at in this paper. I'm going to talk about, let's say, individualism and community and the tension between those ideas. In my intro, I'm going to describe what individualism meant in America. Then I'm going to describe what community meant in America. And then I'm going to talk about how these two ideas sort of push and pull at each other, how they sometimes work together, but they also are sometimes problematic. Then I'm going to wrap my intro up with a thesis that answers the guiding question. Now, the guiding question for this paper is going to be just like what we've been doing all semester, except for 4 artifacts. So what do these 4 artifacts tell us about the tension between X and Y? In the examples I'm talking about, what do these 4 artifacts tell us about individualism and community in American culture, or traditional femininity and ideals of equality in American culture, or any one of the tensions that you can choose from our cultural tensions handout. And the best part about this paper in terms of the thesis is you don't write it till the end. You don't lock yourself into a position at the beginning. You wait till you've actually drafted your body paragraphs, and then you try to construct a thesis that covers what you actually said about all of those artifacts. So the body paragraphs, and there'll be 4 of them, each take one artifact, a painting, a quote from a novel we read, or a passage from one of the Native American texts we read, or a passage from Twain, or a sculpture, or a song, or a building. Anything we've looked at counts as an artifact. But the rule is the artifact has to be created between 1870 and 1920. The only exception to that is if you want to use a scene from one of the westerns that we watched for the course. Then, of course, those come from the later 20th century, and you can use one scene from a western as an artifact in your paper if you wish. So that would be the one exception to the time frame. Again, like the essay as a whole, each body paragraph answers a guiding question. What does this artifact tell us about the tension in American culture I've chosen to write about? Then the paragraph breaks down the artifact and looks at specific details, aspects of the image, words and phrases from a passage or quote or story, if that's what you've chosen, elements of a building, if that's what you've chosen. It's where you break things down and look at the details, like we've been practicing throughout the semester, like you did in your expert project PowerPoint. Then finally, you're going to, in each body paragraph, bring in an important cultural context to understanding the analysis that you just did. And sometimes you're going to bring that cultural context in at the end. Sometimes you're going to bring it in at the beginning. Our textbook, 20th Century American Art, is a great example of a writer connecting the artifacts she discusses to important cultural context. And we'll be talking about this a lot over the next couple weeks as we draft this paper. You'll wrap things up with a conclusion that asks you to answer 2 questions. Where do you think America is today on the cultural tension you've chosen? And how does that compare to where we were during the periods you've discussed? And these conclusions are often more than one paragraph. Sometimes people take a paragraph to answer each of those questions separately, so you have a 2-paragraph conclusion. And sometimes people answer both those questions in 1 paragraph. But it's an important part of the paper where you're really going to be thinking through your own ideas. Now, there are 4 support resources that I've already posted in the course that you're going to need to study and use as you develop this paper. There's a rubric, and that's the actual sheet I use to score your essay, and it goes point by point through what you need in each element. And then there's a sample essay, which comes from a Humanities 250s course, which is Humanities before the Civil War, so you won't have to worry about any of the examples being something you might have wanted to use. Then there are detailed instructions on how to select an artifact, including a list of all the different kind of texts and art and resources and lectures we've had this semester. And finally, there's the cultural tension list sheet, which many of you have already been using, which will help you decide what's the best tension for you to organize your paper around. So I hope that between this video and those resources, you're getting a solid foundation into what this paper is about. Remember, all these resources are to be studied and all are fair game for a quiz. But that's only to make sure that you achieve all these goals in your paper and do well on it, because it's a major part of your grade. See you in Blackboard.